It is the 31st day of the medic strike. The coverage of the month-long strike might have withered a bit on the press, but Kenyans have been enduring a terrible time. The doctors have rightfully stood their ground, asking for what is duly to them. It is instructive that the Kenyan Parliament never saw it fit to convene the House for a special sitting to discuss what is central to all Kenyans. Yet, they found time from their busy holiday homes to discuss the now controversial elections amendments. We have all these talking points in the program tonight. Let's start where we should. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to News Sources. My name is James Smart. Now, news just in is that the government has this evening offered the striking doctors a counter deal that meets the doctors' demands halfway. So they say the doctors were demanding 8 billion shillings on allowances and increments. The government has announced it is prepared to pay about 4 billion shillings. The government offer means the minimum gross salary for doctors will increase to 196,000 shillings from the current 140,000 shillings from the current job group. Doctors' representatives have asked time to meet their members and come back to the government on Friday with a response. That's how we start the program tonight. I'm joined by Dr. Mercy Korir,
Thank you.
Abdullahi Boru, and Patrick Gadara. Let me start with you, Doctor, before I go elsewhere. Does this sound like a good deal?
Smart, if you notice, it's the same deal that was offered the first time the doctors were in the meeting with the government, because back then they offered a minimum of 196 for job group M. And with the deal that they say has been offered now, they have bumped the doctors from job group L to M, that is the medical officers' interns, at the same 196,000, which is the gross salary anyway. So it's just the same, in my opinion, it's just the same deal offered at a different time of the year or of the strike.
Well, the doctor representative as well sent a statement which confirms what you already knew. They said that they've been meeting from the whole day. The meeting was attended by SLC chairperson, PSC chairperson, CEO, PSC, CS Treasury, CS Health, and PS Health, and in fact, the president as well. But they say after lengthy discussions, we have not yet reached a deal. Does that surprise you?
Not at all. I mean, I just want to make a couple of points. One, the strength in numbers. The fact that the doctors have been able to push the government this level is because they are unionized, and they were able to go in that direction, just like the teachers. So there is a need for us to interrogate that. The second part is, I think it just should demonstrate to all of us that this government doesn't really care. 31 days, we do not have the water supply to the main referral hospital has been disconnected. The doctors have been on strike for the last 31 days. And we've got the audacity now to discuss, and the whole country being held hostage to discuss the controversial, election law. It just shows where our priority lies, really.
Gadara, I want to go to the details, but much later. But the question that this has taken this long, right? It's 31 days. Essentially, we have had grandstanding. The government has sort of refused, to meet the doctors earlier on. So whatever the deal which we'll go to discuss and get the details of it, does that say something about, the status of how serious the government has taken this, if this deal is accepted or not?
Well, I totally agree with Abdullahi on this. It's true that the government has essentially roadblocked the entire discussion, and I think if you look at the teacher strike, which is, I think, is quite instructive. The fact that it was allowed to simply drag on and go on, it's almost like a staring game. And in a sense, the government didn't seem to me to be too bothered that people are dying in hospitals, the people who need care cannot get it. And this goes to the root of why we have a government, and people have to ask. And these are questions I think we need to pose. But I also think when we get to the details of the deal, one of the things that I'm surprised in the people who are meeting to negotiate this is where are the county governments? health is meant to be a devolved function. So is the national government negotiating on behalf of counties?
Without the employers.
Precisely.
Is that precisely the question, just before you got to this deal?
And you see, it's actually one of the main questions we've been asking the whole day once we found out that there's a meeting at State House, Mombasa. Where are the county governments? Because they are the implementers of whatever agreement will be reached at. And remember, the 2013 CBA, which has been the topic of this strike, was signed without the county government. And that's why we are where we are today. So without the county government involved, the way they have been since the 4th of December, before the strike and during the strike, then it tells a lot as to really, does the government want to solve this issue?
All right. Let's keep with this. We're now joined by Dr. Lukoya Atwoli from our Eldoret studios. And thankfully, he's someone who know and will be able to give us a bit more. And here's the question, Doctor. The question that we are trying to grapple with, we just known about this deal a few minutes ago, and we want to find out, is it an improved deal? From what you've heard from the conversations that the doctors have been having, and is this an improved deal or is this more of the same?
Yeah, I think this is the same deal that the government had offered or purported to have offered earlier at the beginning of this engagement. And in my view, what the union has been saying through and through is that any offer that is made must be in the context of that document that was signed in 2013. From the information that I have, it doesn't appear that the government is keen to discuss that document, which is the CBA. It seems to me that the government is keen to offer a monetary award and to get it over and done with. My advice to the government and those that are negotiating on behalf of the government is that all these offers that are making, perfectly reasonable to make such offers, but in the context of that document as the CBA. Because there are only 3 or so issues in that document on which there was no agreement. And if those issues are tabled and discussed in the context of that CBA, then in my view it will be very easy to resolve this matter. The union's greatest contention is that they're negotiating and discussing things outside of a legal framework, which makes it very difficult to assure enforcement going forward. And they're speaking from history, where they have been assured certain things, they have even signed agreements that have not been implemented. So my advice to the government, of course, is that as they engage the union, they must bear in mind that history, and they must bear in mind that the union is operating from a position where they have been duped before. And therefore, any offer that is made must be made in the context of the government offering their way out on how to implement that CBA. And in truth, if that offer is made in that context, I think the union leadership is very reasonable and they're able to engage the government on that.
All right, Dr. Lukoya, the question that I'm reading the statement about sent by the Secretary Communications State House and also the State House spokesperson, Manoa Esipisu. It finished the statement by saying that the government is coming with clean hands, and the doctors, the representatives who were in that meeting, have asked for more time, which is Friday, to come back to the government with a response. What you're saying is that this is the very same deal. Yeah. So the question is, what kind of response, what are the doctors representatives actually looking for between now and Friday?
So I think in my mind, I think they are going to be engaging with the same government officials, both formally and informally. And in my mind, when they meet on Friday, they should be meeting in the context of looking at the offer that has been made and seeing how to improve it and to anchor it into a legally binding document that is a CBA. I think it is not possible to get these leaders and put them in a room and make the same offer to them and ask them to sign it or to agree without consulting also with their National Advisory Council, which is part of the Union Constitution. However, in my view, I think the way out of this impasse is to negotiate these offers and everything in the context of the CBA. I have seen the offers that have been made. One of them includes making the entry level for the doctors, the new doctors, to be one job group higher. That was one of the issues in the CBA, and if they discuss that and agree on it, they would have resolved one issue. The other issue was on training. And I see they mentioned training in the statement, but there are no specifics. And in my view, if the specifics are fleshed out and put down in the document, they'll have resolved the second issue. And the final issue is remuneration. And remuneration is something that they can discuss, a framework of implementation going forward based on the available funds to the government. So, in my mind, when they meet on Friday, and I understand they'll meet at the Treasury, they should be able to thrash out these issues very quickly. Because when the union goes back to the members, what the members will ask the union leadership is the offer that has been made, is it anchored in a legally binding document? Is it anchored in the CBA? And if it is not, I think it is going to be very difficult for the union to come back to the government and say, we have accepted this offer. The second thing is that looking at the statement that has been issued from the government, the communication, you'll see that the offer is not very structured, in the sense that they are saying the doctors will be entering a job group M. However, they are making offers for improving pay for job group L, in which, conceivably, there will be no doctor in that job group. So what are they saying? Secondly, it is not very clear about mobility. So if people are moving to one job group, is it the entire medical establishment moving up one job group, or is it just the entry level but everybody else stays where they are? So those are the kinds of specifics that need to be fleshed out and to be placed in the context of a CPA before we can start talking about a serious offer.
I want to ask you a quick question before I come back to my panel, then I'll come back to you much later. It is still early days, and we're still trying to, open up this issue and, deal with it, layer by layer. The question is, for you, is this deal or no deal?
Obviously, it's no deal, because if it was a deal, they would have signed it already.
All right. I'm coming back to you. Hang on there. Let me come to my panel here. Very emphatic. And these are the questions, these are the issues that we'll be exercising ourselves in the next few hours as Friday gets in. Is that the question is, the government appears to pushing doctors into some corner, that you've offered you a deal twice and you're refusing to take it.
You see, the thing is, they have, as Professor Atolia said, the government has just been offering the same deal using different players. Now, this time around, they roped in the president, the chair of the PSC, Professor Kobia, the chair of SRC, Sarah Serem. So they have just increased or just made different players to just offer the same thing. So it means we're not really progressing.
We're not moving forward.
We're not moving forward. But this time around, I'm glad that we're actually discussing something, because prior to that, the discussions were pegged on the CBA is valid, the CBA is invalid. But let's remember that much as the government is saying it's coming here with clean hands, the doctors have a court case which is due to be rolled on next Tuesday, the 10th of January, on the contempt of court, where the doctors had been called to suspend the strike. The government appealed against the October ruling on the judgment on the CBA. They already appealed, and that is due also for determination. So that really puts into question whether the government really wants to solve this, or is it just a matter of pure optics?
Mm-hmm. Did you read the question? Just from a nice segue. Is the government really interested in solving this, of boxing the doctors in a corner, as the teachers were, and say, this is the deal, you have a court case and things, you're really running against time?
I think the doctors have all the time in the world. That's the sad part. We are moving into an election year. I mean, even if we just, for a second, suspend all the, intricacies, all the details, even purely from the optics side, they can say they've offered a deal, and it's the same deal offered, adding different stakeholders. We're still there. It's 2 steps forward, 1 step backward. But one of the fundamental questions that I really would want to put out there is, I think even it's no longer just between the doctors and the government, right? It is also us. For a very long time, whatever we will call it, middle class or floating class. They say floating because if you miss one salary, you just go back to another class, right? Yeah. Are we really serious about this? Because for a very long time, our, response mechanism has always been when we've privatized our response to any public problems. Yeah. We have problems with the school, let's take our kids to private school. We've got problems with, public health, let's just go to a private hospital. We've got problems with, public transport, let's just buy 4x4. But this one, we cannot do it for a very long time. We cannot consistently go on this, oh, no, I just don't want to process this, let me just go and take my kids. It will reach a point where, the insurance premium will keep on going up, and then few people will benefit And we cannot just be M-Pesaing people. We cannot just be having concerts. We cannot just be having, you know, the first ladies, you know, marathon all the time to raise money for health issues. We really have got no option, because this, for me, is an opportunity for us, you know, whatever we are stationed in life, to actually wrestle with this, because this is a really fundamental issue, and how this will end will probably have impact on so many other levels.
The central question of the government has always been saying that we don't have money. The money that the doctor is asking for is way too much. You're asking for, is it 1,000% increase? In fact, this statement say this is in fact 100% increase in some of the allowances and increments sent by Manoa CPC tonight.
Well, I think to go back to what you had said about government coming with clean hands, we've just seen the MPs award themselves huge Christmas bonus. You know, it seems to me that there is no money for the rest of us, but there is quite a lot of money for people in government, for politicians, etc. You know, every time we have one of our prominent politicians, if they pass away, we want to give them state funerals, etc. There is money, but it is money for whom? You know, and I think the big question, to go back to what Abdullahi was saying, I think it's talking more about a wider policy issue about how we actually address the health sector, how do we actually manage it. You know, I think the other point I might make is that when you look at how the government has dealt with doctors and how it's dealt with teachers, they are very similar. You know, where it made an offer to the teachers. You know, same thing, it had an agreement with the doctors, and then it tries to roll it back. And then when they go on strike, there's this push to sort of criminalize the strike, to try and get them in, you know, try and force them to take it. And it seems to me there is no goodwill within government to actually get this going, to actually resolve this, you know, in a manner that works for everybody, you know, so that you actually have a working health system and not just doctors who are unhappy with their terms and conditions.
Well, since the medics commenced industrial action a month ago, the first few weeks were dominated with press coverage. Many news reports detailed the negotiations, the many press conferences, well, sprinkled with a little bit of suffering here and there. Did the media miss something in our reportage? And the question about this, you talked about optics. As long as this strike goes on, just like the teacher strike, at some point parents became impatient with the teachers. And the whole country is like, you know, you need to go back to school tomorrow, next week, anytime. You just need to go. So the question is, as long as this strike goes on, who's going to get the pressure? Is it the government or the teachers?
Oh, the doctors. I think what he raised about the middle class and the floating class. You know, we are the people who will tweet, make something trending, then action is taken about it. But as long as we're not directly being affected by that suffering, we don't know. Like during this strike is when talking to a few people here and there, people who you would expect to know what doctors are all about or what the public health sector is all about, you realize that they don't actually know how bad it is in the public sector. And the person, unfortunately, who suffers is the person out in the villages whose only place they depend on is the public sector. And the question you are asking was, you have your platinum card that, you know, gives you probably international health coverage. If you are in a remote village somewhere and you're involved in an accident, where is the first place that people will rush you to?
The clinic.
The nearest any facility, be it a dispensary with or without even the nurse, they will take you there. So it's up to us to actually make sure that those facilities are working. And to see that the government has let this strike go on for 31 days and counting is actually telling. One of the key pillars of any successful government is its health sector, apart from the other sectors. But health is a key determinant of the success of any government. So to see that we have doctors who've been out for 31 days and counting, patients have been suffering, people have been dying.
To just throw the opinion poll that was released a few weeks before, you know, December, it said that this doctor strike had no effect, absolutely, on the government. Let me speak to Professor in Eldoret. Prof, just the same question. As long as this strike goes on, you know, 31 days, you know, possibly 33 days and maybe a deal, as you said, no deal. The question is, is it bad for the doctors? Are doctors going to get more pressure, or do you think the government is going to get more pressure? And ask that question in this sense that in the teacher strike, the context of the teacher strike, essentially we're forced by the public to go back to school, regardless of the deal.
Yeah. So, you know, we are not operating in a vacuum. We are operating in a context in which this has happened before. There are, other strikes have happened in the past, and members of the public have pressurized doctors, and they have been very annoyed with the doctors and asked them to go back to work because of the Hippocratic Oath, because patients are suffering, and so on and so forth. But this time, because of the chronology of the events that have happened, because of events that began 5 years ago, culminating in an agreement that was signed 3 years ago, and the doctors have made this very clear, and they gave a notice that was more than the legally required notice of 21 days, and when they went on strike, the government did not do anything. So members of the public have been watching. It has been televised, it has been in the media. So I have seen people saying that they are suffering because the government is not doing what it's supposed to do. At the end of the day, this is one of the doctor strikes that will be left squarely at the feet of this government. I am very glad, indeed, that the president has taken charge and that the president seems to be leading the negotiations from the front. I think this is the way it should be done. Because should the strike continue and people continue suffering and people continue dying, it will be at the door of the chief executive of this republic. And it is therefore his responsibility to ensure that the doctors can go back to work as soon as possible. So I'm happy that he has taken charge, and I'm hopeful that when they meet on Friday, he will be there, and he will be leading from the front, and he will be giving instructions to his civil servants to do what must be done to get the doctors back to work. I think one of the things that we must remember is that this time, the industrial action, as usual, is not just about the money, it's not just about salaries. This is about integrity of government. When government signs a deal, will it keep up its end of the bargain? This is about the health sector. This is about universal access to healthcare for Kenyans. This is a deal that ought to ensure that the doctors, there are adequate numbers of doctors trained, and that when they are trained, they are adequately remunerated, and that they are kept at their stations so that people can access quality healthcare as envisaged in the Constitution 2010. The key responsibility holder for the right to health in this country is the President of the Republic. And when he addresses Parliament every year to give the State of the Nation address, he is required by the Constitution to give a report on how he is ensuring that every single Kenyan is enjoying all the rights guaranteed in the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. One of those rights is the right to health. He will have to explain to Kenyans how he safeguarded their lives during the doctor strike and what steps he took to ensure that the doctors went back to work and the services were normalized. So the key responsibility holder, in my view, is the chief executive of this republic.
Okay, Prof. Well,
I just wanted to chip in on
Yes.
one thing about your
Very
last
quick.
question,
Yeah.
very quickly. It's the question around, has the media missed the boat? I'm glad they missed, because one of the things about this strike that I really was impressed with was that they did not rely on the mainstream media. They went on social media and just, went with the hashtag Lipa Kama Tender, because this strike is happening against the background of the alleged amount of money that was lost at the Ministry of Health. Money that would have, if they've been added on top of the 4 billion that they would have done,
5 billion.
we won't be sitting here. We won't be sitting here. And so for me, I think the media, they can continue missing the boat, but I think there are other alternatives. Of course, it's not about you.
Of course, news sources have been in ever since. Thank you very much for that question. The point of just the coverage and tie down with, what both the Prof and the Dr. has been talking about, the question about just the optics of this. Okay, that the more we go on to hospitals and find empty beds, we find, patients suffering and families who would claim, their loved ones, and there's this bad optics. So whose responsibility at the end of the day will it be?
Well, I think at the end, this is all going to come down on the government. I think we've seen a sea change from when government pretty much controlled the narrative on strikes in ways back. I think social media has really changed a lot of things. And I don't think it's just with the doctor strike. I think also with the teacher strike, the teachers were able to mobilize quite a lot of sympathy because they could articulate what their case was. And people could see that actually this is the government misbehaving, where it offers something, then takes it back. And the fact that you see so much corruption, so much stealing, by government officials, and then they come back and they say there is no money. When they keep awarding themselves all these parts and benefits, and then they come back and tell you, well, there's no money for you. I think the optics of it really look bad on the face of government. I think going into an election year, this is something the opposition is probably going to mine,
Thank you.
all the way.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, just want to shift gears, but I want to thank Professor. Thank you very much for staying on. Prof will be back on in 30 minutes on top of the hour to discuss these issues and more. Let's shift gears now, and the Senate report on the controversial amendment law is due in a couple of hours. The Amos Wako-led committee will table its findings and recommendations tomorrow at the Senate ahead of the vote, widely expected to go government's way. The National Assembly passed the laws a few days ago amid acrimony and unparliamentary-like behavior. Way forward. Where should I start? Boru, what's the way forward on this? Because we'll be talking to an IT expert shortly, but the question is, with this matter has been decided, the manual bit is going to be part of the laws, whether we like it or not. So what happens?
Voting has always been manual.
On the bit of the adding the manual bit for that, people can go and vote, or the evids, that you show up and say, I could not be recognized by the equipment, so yes. I needed the manual register.
My problem has always been that we have such a low expectation that this technology will fail. That is fatalistic. Why do we have this notion that, oh no, technology is... unless we've premeditated, and 2013, if any 2013 is any guide, why do we premeditate that this will fail unless it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that we are designing it to fail? Secondly, in terms of articulation, voting has always been manual. What is not manual...
And the counting as well.
And counting as well. What has not been manual is the transmission of the results. And
that's only from 2013.
Exactly. So with somebody like SK Macharia sitting there, for me, what really captures this all is SK Macharia and Musheru. This guy, is hanging around with, Mark Zuckerberg, is ex-Googler, and this guy comes out and say Al-Shabaab could probably hack our server, and then SK Macharia, politely, this godfrey old guy, if, somebody would have supported, Manuel, coming out and say, you know what, we can have satellite in all these places where we'll not have this for the results to be transmitted. But even more importantly, though, we tend to, particularly this administration, tend to see itself, as the guardian of this digital revolution and everything. We are the Silicon Savannah, blah, blah, blah. Yep. And then one day, Duale leads the charge. We go to Parliament, and we change the law and we say, oh, no, we want it to be done manual. It's the split personality that I struggle with around this administration all the time. So I think whether they have it their way or not, and I think also for me the most important thing is it doesn't matter where Jubilee or, code stands. I see people who are, I deem reasonable, come out and say, oh, no, because I support Jubilee, this has to be done like this. I really suspend all my thoughts. So I think whichever way this goes, I think we're really in deep trouble. It's not so much, it's the integrity of the process. It's not just the process itself, it's how I feel about the integrity of the process. I think the water has been murky.
I think with this particular amendment law, it's not really about manual, electronic. It was how it was brought to the House of Parliament and the events that went about that created the issue of integrity and mistrust. So now, while if probably they would have followed due process and due course and not have all the melodrama that was there in Parliament, nobody would have read mischief in it, because as with any electronics or any digital platform, you expect that there'll be some degree of failure. But your backup should not be manual. Your backup should be probably another electronic system, you know,
Well,
something digital.
To be honest, I
10
think,
seconds.
I think in a sense we are missing the discussion when we talk about backups and hacking and everything. We're talking about devices that
And they
are
can
there
fail.
essentially to identify a voter when he turns up, you know, and to transmit results.
I'll have to hang you on because we take a short break. We'll come back and pick it up right from there.
All right.
We're taking a manual break. This is News Sources. Don't go too far.